Well, good morning, guys. It is Infrastructure Matters number 50, and I'm not talking age, I'm talking about number of episodes. There you go.
Episode 50. Wow, that has gone quick.
So I can't imagine being your friend for this long. It's really, All right, guys. Welcome
Just
to
keep
Krista.
taking the medication. You'll be fine.
Welcome to Krista Case, Macomber, or is it Macomber Case? I don't know which one it is. Anyway, Case is a lot easier to say than Macomber. Anyway, and I've got, of course, Stephen Dickens here, who's joining us. We're talking a bit about earnings, but more, if you want to talk about financial kind of stuff, go listen to Patrick and Daniel. We're going to more talk about kind of where this stuff is going and what it means to the infrastructure guys and everything else, because we have some significant things going on. And then there are some announcements that we will touch base on. So to kick things off, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Steve to talk a little bit about AWS.
Yeah, so I'm digging in and writing my research night. This literally happened last night after markets close. I think, stock is up 21% year to date, according to CNBC. I haven't checked this morning. Earnings beat, revenue, small miss. But I mean, you're talking 147.98 billion versus an estimate of 148.56. So we just got to be, really sort of, yes, these estimates are good. Yes, the markets look for beat, raise as the kind of gold standard. But when you're talking about quarterly revenue of 147.98 billion versus a consensus estimate of 148.56, you got to put it in context. That's not very far away. Amazon Web Services, the piece that we are obviously most interested in, 26.3 billion versus 26 billion. Let's just put that in context before we sort of dig in here. Quarterly revenue, 26 billion for a cloud business that 18 years ago was selling books. That is frankly astonishing growth over that 18, 19-year period for me. This is tracking now at over 100 billion from a cloud business, which is a business unit annually within the wider Amazon group. So ad revenue, just a slight miss, 12.8 versus 13. Obviously there's two sides to this business in what we cover in this podcast. We're interested in where AWS is going. There's obviously the ads business, the retail business, there's devices, there's a whole bunch of other things within the Amazon sort of organization, but it's becoming the law of big numbers for that organization, so.
And one comment I'll make about the number. We still have more than probably 60-70% of the enterprise is still on premise.
And in some sectors it's even more than that.
Right. And it's significant. It's, it's kind of like, it's mind-boggling about where we are in terms of, well, it's not mind-boggling because we had CrowdStrike that shut down us as we all went on vacation or whatever, CrowdStrike kind of thing. But, how dependent and our world is on the technology and whether it's off-prem or on-prem. So cool.
Well, I think that as we track AWS, and I track those guys pretty closely, I'm sort of going to be digging in, obviously, where they are from an AI perspective. I wrote about Alphabet's earnings and particularly what Google Cloud was doing. As I dig in and go through those numbers to write my research note today, I'll be looking for CapEx investment. There's a huge build-out phase within the hyperscalers. That's what I'll be looking at. AWS has got work to do. Is it in third place from its AI perspective? Proposition, there's I've heard that narrative. I think they're plowing a different route, a different furrow than kind of Google and Microsoft, respectively, less about having their own large language models and more about being a home to host your large language model. Maybe that strategy is going to work out as large language models become more commoditized and things like Llama and, other open source models, being a home for open source models may turn out to have been the more strategic play when we look back 5 years from now. So, I mean, that's the whole sort of broader narrative around AWS. Things I'm going to be looking for when I dig into the earnings transcript: AI-driven CapEx spend, and what they're starting to see with revenue come through for things like Q and some of their other services. So those are going to be the things I'm looking for. But I think the miss on top line revenue against consensus estimates, it's a tiny miss in comparison. Now, yes, they want to beat raise, but I never understand how the markets react the day after anyway. So
Yeah.
you
So,
can.
so, so let's so let's go to a positive one, which is also very, very much so benefited from the cloud and the hybrid cloud strategy, and that is Commvault, which is like they took it and hit it out of the park. Jeez.
That they did. They absolutely did. So for Commvault, I have the numbers up here. So total revenue is up 13% year to year to just under $225 million. But in particular, their subscription revenue up 28% year to year to 124 million, right? So that's kind of representing more than half of Commvault's revenues these days. And their ARR for that subscription business up 27% year to year to 636 million. So certainly Commvault was a very early mover in terms of embracing that, kind of cloud delivery model. They launched their Metallic division back in late 2019, if my memory is serving me correctly, at their annual trade show that October. And so that really kind of gave that fuel for Commvault to really kind of put their stake in the ground. And what they've been doing over, I would say, really the last, year to 18 months has been folding that cloud division in, and really
Is that
kind
what's
of
working here, Krista? I mean, when I was on some of the early calls, the three of us were on with Commvault, it was kind of, we've got Metallic, we've got the traditional business,
Mhm,
we're kind of pulling those together. I know
mhm.
you've been tracking and working with them a lot more closely since those initial calls I was on. Is that what's starting to come home to roost here? The Metallic fold in, the kind of doubling down that Anna and the sort of marketing team have been doing on that message. Is that what's starting to translate, do you think?
It is, Steven. So, again, they were really able to put their stake in the ground from a cloud perspective, but it was a little bit of a double-edged sword. So the feedback that we got from customers was there was a little bit of confusion. Is Metallic this completely separate, entity from Commvault? If I am looking to use Commvault to protect on-premises and cloud, when should I use Complete, which is their flagship platform that protects on-prem? When should I use Metallic? So what Commvault has been doing is really trying to bring those businesses together to be able to tell that more fluid sort of hybrid and multi-cloud story from a protection standpoint, and also kind of that story around the flexibility of delivery. So absolutely, I would say that's what's
I
working.
mean, it's
Um,
interesting for me, new CMO comes in, really gets the messaging tight, really doubles down on that clarity. I think it gets lost, the CMO role, sometimes in what that can translate to on the stock price. The
mhm,
technology's probably got better, but has the messaging outpaced the quality of the product delivery? And
mhm,
that's what I'm always looking at, the sort of clarity of message, clarity of sort of narrative put into the market. The product can be great, and that's got to keep moving as well, but it really makes a difference, I think.
absolutely. And I would say the other area to that point, Stephen, that they're really, hitting the mark in terms of messaging is around resiliency.
Mhm.
And actually the CEO, Sanjay Mirchandani, he actually touched on this, which is what I'm going to be watching for the second half of this year following the CrowdStrike outage is just how much that message of resiliency resonates, not only for resiliency against cyber attacks, but also resiliency against all of these other disasters that we still have to, be able to recover from. So I'm definitely expecting a resurgence in interest in data protection. They kind of reference some of their offerings, for example, for data air gapping, to be able to have those copies that are available for recovery. So again, from a resiliency standpoint, they've certainly been making strides around security. The CEO, Sanjay Mirchandani, he said they've had their most conversations with CISOs, and I believe he said both CISOs and CIOs actually over the past quarter, right? So that kind of shows the traction that they've been making from more of the kind of cybersecurity perspective. But I'm also anticipating it's going to benefit them following the CrowdStrike outage, as companies are really looking at, again, their resiliency and ability to be able to recover from, an outage like this.
What I find is significant about their numbers is not only this, because they've benefited from the work that they've done on the hybrid piece of it, but as we've talked about, data protection is is the stickiest of all technologies. To move on it is, and yes, we've had a resurgence of data protection with cybersecurity and reevaluating what's going on. But this big of a jump means they are either they're winning new business. I mean, it's not like everybody's got data protection out there. So what's happening is they're winning new business somewhere along the line.
Are they winning share, or are they getting, they've got to be winning share, right?
And there's also expansion going on in terms of the amount of data that's out there. And you're doing more in the cloud. You're protecting more in the cloud that before wasn't protected. As we all know, you are responsible for your reliancy and your protection up there. So all in all, it's a outstanding, and kudos to the team over there that have produced this. So let me skip over to the next one, and it's kind of related to this. The first piece of it is what happened with Intel, and there was a lot of noise in market, in our market, about what Intel announced, and I won't go through all the numbers because I think there's enough out there you can grab it. But the big piece of it was the profitability was significant, and the other thing that they announced is that they're going to be doing a layoff of about 15% of their people over the next probably a little bit over 24 months. They said they were targeting a headcount reduction 15% by the end of 2025, but the majority of that is going to be this year. And most of that, when I read through the earnings transcript, most of the focus was on profitability because they hit their top line, but the profitability was significantly hit. And some of that was significantly hit because of some of the movements they've been making in their foundry, and also accelerating technology into the market. So one of the things they did is they accelerated their AI PC technology, bringing into the market because they see this thing as significant and big. So what he said is that they expect it to grow from less than 10% of the market to over 50% of the market in 2026. And they really they're going to go out there and grab this market. They've already got the companies that they work with. I mean, I don't track the client business, but I do now because the AI PC is a little bit more than, just a PC or something that's sitting on your desk. It's something that's going to be running Copilot.
Maybe we need to get Olivier on a show and talk about what's going on in that side at some point.
And I think that would be a great idea. And what they're talking about is this next generation is Microsoft has qualified it with the Copilot PCs, and then there's another 20 OEMs that have got it. So we're going to start shipping. On the data center piece, what they saw and what we are seeing is that the traditional server business has been depressed. And they're getting double hit because they've got some significant competition and pricing competition that's going on. But so much of the money is going into the AI side of the house. Your traditional server market has not been doing the uptick. They haven't been getting the numbers. We haven't been doing the upgrades. So the question is when is this going to recover, either for on-prem or in the cloud? And what Gelsinger basically said is that we're going to see the cloud happen first, because the value proposition of Granite, which will be coming out here, is significant in terms of consolidation and delivery of it. And that kind of gets it into another kind of commentary, is that our friends over at Marvell announced some CXL technology called Structera. And what was really cool about it is one of the offerings, and I know I've been focusing way too much on this piece of it, is a way to recycle memory. So what they're doing, saying, and it's pitching to the hyperscalers, and they're testing it out. I can take the memory out of the older servers. I can put it into the CXL as a shared memory device and put it in with the newer servers and recycle it. And the performance of what you need is there. So we're going to see them doing that, and that, as we go into this next generation of kind of environments, the hyperscalers are probably going to latch onto this. We won't see the enterprise doing it because they don't crack open boxes, but the hyperscalers build their own stuff. So it's kind of an interesting kind of thing, saying what we're going to see in this next 2025 in terms of what's going to happen in the server business. So stay tuned to the enterprise and whether or not folks start to change things out this next year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my commentary on Intel. A little bit less than Patrick and Daniel.
I think my piece, just to Pat Gelsinger is the only person who can turn that company around in my mind. So he's in a turnaround job. This is kind of Lou Gerstner stroke 1995 kind of existential threat moment for the Intel is too big to fail for the US from a geopolitical perspective, and in Pat I trust. So, I think there's some tough quarters ahead, but I think if you look over the 5-year time horizon, this company's going to be, it's too instrumental to the US on lots of strategic levels.
And one of the things he said during the Q&A, which I thought was very, very telling, is like, I say this rebuilding that we're underway is the most significant rebuilding of Intel since the transition from memory to microprocessors 4 decades ago. And, that's where they're at. It's big. It's very big. So,
it's a once in a generation rebrand. It's not, trim and nudge. It is a fundamental. This will set them up for the next 20 years. What Pat is doing right now.
And the other reason, what you said, you have trust in Pat. I do too. In my interaction,
I think it's his transparency, Kimberly. For me, it's the guy's a deeply religious, sort of genuinely good human, and I think. And I mean, yes, you've got to be a smart business person. Yes, you've got to do all those things. But I think genuinely caring about Intel and what it's trying to do, and feeling that in his very fiber, and knowing where he's at and knowing what he's got to do, that's a huge part of it, I think.
Super grounded. Okay, so talking about the enterprise, let's flip over to one more. We are in earnings season, guys. Kyndryl.
Yeah, so I mean, Kyndryl, it's a tough one. Revenues down. That there's some challenges here. This was a business that, when it exited IBM, what was it, just over 2 years ago, was a $19 billion business. They're now a $15 billion business. The market doesn't like that story. But what you've got to think about is, what was that business? GTS, as was within IBM, was a boat anchor. They had the wrong mix of contracts. Those were not profitable contracts. Martin Schroeder, ex-CFO of IBM, has done a fantastic job of righting this ship, helping the team clean out some of those low-value, low-margin, in some cases loss-making contracts, pivot to growth, strong numbers from the consult business, double-digit revenue growth. That's a new part to their business. When they were part of IBM Consulting would have taken that business. So to grow that business double digits, lots of focus on losses, pre-tax adjusted income, EBITDA, all that sort of financial speak. But I think the really sort of crucial piece for me is companies talking about growth coming back in the fourth quarter. They've moved their reporting period. So this was Q1. They shifted it by a quarter to clean some of this stuff up. So, I mean, I think the strategy that they're on, focusing on Kyndryl Bridge from an innovation point of view, focusing on their accounts, focusing on, there's a 3A strategy that they've got. They are making really strong progress. I think, I look periodically at the stock. It's tanked since they went split out under the ticker KD. What you can see now, I think it's reached the bottom, and we're starting to see that come up. This isn't stock advice. This company hits its Q4 growth objectives and starts becoming a growth story. It's not going to be much growth. It's going to be low single digits if they get there. But I think if they can get there, and the work that Martin and the team will have done over the last sort of 2.5 years at that point, it'll be a fantastic turnaround of a company that was in not a great place when it spun out from IBM. Solid brand, solid execution. The mainframe business that I work with closely under Petra and her team, they're the biggest in this space. There's some really strong fundamentals. As I say, Consult, Bridge, and mainframe, I think they're in really good shape on those three vectors.
Yeah. And, one of the things they probably were a little bit behind on is all the AI stuff, especially a lot of that went over to that's IBM, tend to have more of that. So getting back to what we were seeing in terms of the churn of what was going on in the enterprise or not doing what they were doing this last year and spending their money on was cybersecurity, AI. And not in those places, the extra money or they're rediverting some numbers or kind of trying to make things last a bit longer so they can afford the other pieces that they're putting the money into. So,
well, you look at where they were when they were part of IBM. It was to prop up IBM Cloud, and it was to sort of work with the IBM solutions. They've come out hard. They've done a really good job of recruiting a strong ecosystem and have massively invested in their Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud businesses. And that's what's driving that Consult number. So really strong turnaround story. Tough from a financial analyst point of view because nobody wants to hear about revenue going down, and Martin's trying to find some sort of silver linings in that. But I think the longer term, if they can get to growth, long term positive.
Yeah. So we had a few announcements. There was one fun one that was Veeam and Splunk, and so talk about that's kind of you may not think that those two go together, but they do. It's not maybe it's peanut butter and marshmallow sandwich or peanut butter and jelly. I don't know.
Right.
Peanut butter and marshmallow.
Peanut butter.
Some of my friends used to have peanut butter and marshmallow. I always thought.
Yeah, I can get behind that. I can get behind peanut butter and marshmallow.
No. Peanut butter and bacon on toast.
Yep.
Anything with bacon is a good idea, right? Sorry, Krista, get us back on topic.
Okay. Peanut butter and marshmallow, Veeam and Splunk.
Yes, yeah. And I would say, these things have to go together these days. So specifically what the announcement was is that Veeam has announced an extension for Splunk that allows Splunk users to be able to monitor the Veeam backup infrastructure. And this is so important. And in fact, what we are looking at here, when we look at the ability for data protection solutions to integrate with your SIM tools and any other tools that your security operations center might be using to, kind of monitor and threat hunt, that data protection infrastructure needs to be integrated as a component of that visibility. We've known for quite some time now that the attackers have been targeting backup infrastructure. And naturally, that's because it is the backups that, the organization is going to use to recover from attacks. So this was, again, just kind of a good announcement. And I would say something that we're really looking at as an important table stakes, kind of criteria for data protection solutions today.
Wow, that's really cool. And I mean, as we're saying this, we talked about, Commvault and they had done, they purchased the ThreatWise kind of guy. So that was bringing this together. And, 10 years ago, this never would have worked because there wasn't that connectivity between the CISO and the CIO. But now This is definitely working in the market. So, yeah. All right. So we have one other to touch on. Krista, did you have anything else on that?
No, I mean, that's sort of, my high level. And like you say, just kind of that integration between IT ops and security teams today, sort of it reflects that trend. And it really just reflects a common theme I was hearing at RSA, which is really just the need to have that visibility and the ability to monitor across the entire, IT ecosystem, not just your production system. So, the more that the data protection infrastructure is folded into that visibility is going to be very crucial.
Right. All right. Last take it out is we had a couple Google announcements that you wanted to touch on.
Yeah, so just sheer keeping up this week. You've got earnings announcements, and then everybody's dropping AI. So I've got some work to do to dig into these. But and classic Google, they just drop everything. You've got to sort of pick through this. So there's a couple of articles that are speaking to the press about this. But stuff around BigQuery, stuff around Looker. Bringing graph capabilities to Spanner, a whole raft. I think lots of technical detail that I need to go through. I think what I would say is that I'm expecting to see more and more of this. We've seen this with Oracle, with 23AI. As we start to get away from all of the sort of jazz and hand waving being at the top of the stack around generative AI models, I'm expecting the trend here to be let's get the data right, let's get the curation right, let's get the data stack right, let's go down and make sure all of these tools are starting to integrate into things like BigQuery and down into Databricks and down into Snowflake and down into Oracle databases and Teradata and cloud. That whole sort of data stack, if you will. I see these updates as part of that. So I've got a whole, probably 2 or 3 hours of reading to do at some point over the weekend, because you just get these announcements and you're like, okay, I've got to work out how this fits with this bit and how it. But I mean, directionally, this is the type of work that we're going to see as we start to move towards enterprise deployments of AI. Where's the data coming from? What's the quality of the data? How clean is the data? What's the security of the data? What's that data pipeline? How's it moving through? Where's it coming from? Just that whole piece is going to need a lot more work. We've got the top line. We've got the sort of generative models piece that has captured all the noise. So I think lots of good stuff for me to dig through from Google, but literally 2 or 3 big announcements down in their data stack. I've got to sort of do some reading, but directionally looks really positive from me from what I've sort of a quick read.
Yeah. So we're going to see that addressing that data stack, data pipeline, data platform, whatever you want to call that thing, because it is, there's a long road on that in order to get to where you're using your data. And we're seeing everything from your Snowflake, Databricks, those kind of guys come out with things. You've got, of course, AWS, Oracle, Google. You have your traditional data storage people building those capabilities within there. We have data management kind of software that is coming out, et cetera. So there's so much going on. It's going to be interesting because there is a little bit of I wouldn't say it's a gold rush as much, but it's a need, a real painful need, and that's a barrier to entry that we're seeing in terms of being able to deploy and bring out the AI systems. So there's going to be quite a bit of decisions. There's going to be some stumbles and successes.
This is once this is all the work we saw get built out in 99, 2000 for the internet. This is what we saw with the mobile ecosystem in 2007, 2008. What we've seen with cloud, that you sort of say the high level thing, and then you've got to get OpenStack, you've got to get Kubernetes, you've got to get cloud backups. It just ripples down the stack, and we're at the same with AI. We're starting to see that ripple down the stack piece come through.
Right. So, guys, we've been here. It's been about 30 minutes, so thank you very much for joining us, and covered a lot of ground here. We've got this next week, we've got Krista at Black Hat. Steve is at Share. I am at FMS, which is now called the Future of Memory and Storage. What the heck is this? We're in August. We're supposed to be on vacation, and we've got 3 big shows going on, right?
I'm doing planning for what looks like September and October, what means I might see my wife for like 5 minutes on a Sunday afternoon. It's crazy. I've got a plan. I've got to sit down next week.
Here's my violin for you.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I wasn't looking for sympathy. I've got literally a block on my calendar to book flights and hotels, and it's probably going to take me 2 hours.
There we go.
Once September comes around, it's going to be crazy.
Our listeners are just crying for you. They're just crying. There you go.
Vegas sounds fun, but it's not fun, people.
It's like, how many times do we get to go there every year? Okay, guys, thank you very much for joining in, and don't forget to like, share, tell people all about us, because we have too much fun doing this every week. Certainly do. Take care.